The world of Malaysian football was thrown into turmoil this week as the National Federation was fined 1.8 million ringgits and 7 international players were banned for 12 months in a forgery scandal. FIFA has found that the suspiciously not very Malaysian-sounding Gabriel Felipe Aroja, Facundo Tomas Garhez, Rodrigo Julian Holgado, Imanol Javier Machucha, João Vitor Brandão Figueiredo, John Irizabal Aragui, and Hector Alejandro Hevel Serrano all submitted falsified documents to prove their eligibility to represent Malaysia in June's 4-0 Asian Cup win over Vietnam. But there is a silver lining for Hiramau Malaya fans. The absence of these Latin pretenders will surely make way for breakthrough hotshot Richard Chin. The Borneo Bobby Barr was handed his first start for Wraith Rovers yesterday after a series of promising substitute appearances, and Barry Robson's faith was repaid in the 65th minute when the Kota Kinabalu Colin Cameron dinked the ball over Aidan McAdams and into the Arbroath net. And with a crucial Asian Cup qualifying double-header coming up against Laos in October, it is surely inevitable that the Johor Bahru Joe Cardle will also soon see his first international start. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron. The Rovers beat Arbroath 3-0 yesterday, and we are going to talk about it. Joining me tonight to do just that, it's Blair Hopcroft. First of all, how are you?
Well done, mate. That was incredible. That you mentioned it pre-starting rather the Christmas episode with that. I had the same nerves. You were so far through one take. That was incredible. Well done, mate. That was actually better than the entire first half yesterday.
Thank you. And also, you might have heard them in the background there. I think safe to say the only person ever to play Ramstein at Starks Park. It's Alan Douglas Munn. How are you, Alan?
I'm fairly certain. Yeah, I'm fairly certain John Greer didn't play any when he took over for the St Johnstone game a couple of weeks ago. No, I'm really good, mate. Also thoroughly impressed that despite me and Blair kind of giggling and smiling all the way through there, that you didn't mess up any of those pronunciations. Although I do remember from the Christmas one that you did say you're looking at the other screen so you can't actually see us while you're doing that. Otherwise, you absolutely would have lost your shit there, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that I was reading those names rather than committing them to memory. And also, I'm categorically not having my pronunciation fact checked on any of those.
No,
I think
definitely not.
Some of that bordered on getting me into trouble, I think. Anyway, let's move past that. Yes, we'll talk about the game yesterday. I think the pre-match, there was a sort of low-level anxiety, I think, about what we would have to talk about if we get beat. And very much a game of two halves. I think at half-time, some of those anxieties were maybe apparent, but the second half firmly put them to bed. A very kind of professional 3 goals after half-time. Just one change to the starting lineup. Richard Chin, as has been briefly alluded to, coming in for J Rowe. Blair, primarily for the sake of me and Scott, are you prepared to call that a 4-2-3-1 that began the game?
It's funny. No. I'm not. I did at kick-off, to be fair. I mean, I when the team line came out, it was the very first thing I put in the group chat, 4-2-3-1 incoming. I thought they set up as a 4-4-2, I have to say. Right from the off, it was very much 2 up top. 2 kind of, well, I say 2 wide, it was kind of, we had this kind of weird, we talked about it a wee bit last season, I think it was more under Collins, this kind of weird asymmetrical kind of wide on one side and no quite so wide on the other, so it was kind of Paul McMullen really hugging the touchline on one side and Dylan Easton doing Dylan Easton things on the other side. But no, I think we're still waiting on a 4-2-3-1, mate, for my money.
I think probably the key point is it's all very fluid. It's all very... and you see that even just in individual kind of passages of play. There's a fair bit of that where Easton and Chin end up on the other side from one another. And I mean, throughout this first half, there was a bit of chopping and changing. It certainly looked like sort of the last kind of 10, 15 minutes or so of the half that Chin had gone wide left and Easton had come in the middle.
Yeah.
But even at that, there's still sort of rotation within that. And as always, I think it's worth saying that when we talk about these kind of formation type things, that a lot of the time, two people can be looking at the same thing, and you lay it out differently in your head, almost. A 4-2-3-1 can be a 4-3-3 very, very easily, depending on where you sort of draw your lines. I think we'll just take the first half as a whole, really. There's one specific point where Arbroath hit the bar I want to talk about, but more generally than that, Allan, how did you feel as the first half kind of developed?
It was like I didn't ever feel like we were in any trouble, but I didn't like. I'm going to jump on the kind of phraseology you guys were using yesterday. We were never knocking on the door. We were maybe fanning about on the doorstep, but never quite got as far as actually getting kind of knuckles on wood. It was just kind of like we were kind of there, but it just wasn't quite working. I got what I wanted in our group chat beforehand. I was like, I'm all up for it was potentially a 4-2-3-1. It was kind of, as you guys said, it was very fluid. But I was all for the three being, McMullen, Chin, and Easton. I was like, with Hamilton up front, I think this is brilliant. Although what I also said at exactly the same time, and I suspect we'll come back to that, is that the two cannot be Brown and Matthews. It has to be one of them and Byrne.
Yeah.
I suspect that conversation will come. I suspect we'd spend a lot more time on that. We would have spent a lot more time on that if the second half hadn't gone the way it did. If the second half had played out the same as the first, I suspect that would have been a big part of the conversation tonight, to be honest. But it kind of papers over the cracks a wee bit. But yeah, I was very happy with the lineup. I thought we played reasonably well. It just didn't. Nothing really worked. Not from anyone being poor or making mistakes. Things just didn't come off for us. And these things can happen against a team like Arbroath, who are they're very well organised. Fair play to Gold and Hamilton. They've got them really well organised. Everyone knows what they're doing. They work their arses off. They were in third. The pedant in me doesn't allow me to say joint second because goal difference is a thing. They were in
Fair
third
enough.
for a reason beforehand, and I think they showed enough in that first half in particular to kind of say why they were up there, because they do what they do very well. And in Ryan Dow, they've got a really experienced guy who's played a decent number of games in the top flight. He's a great player to have in there at that for a team like that. And I think Arbroath have always had that. And throughout their kind of previous time of doing well in the championship, they always had that experienced old head who'd played at the kind of higher level to kind of guide some of the other guys through it. And I thought you had a good game, actually, a good first half. And I thought, in general, Arbroath looked pretty tidy.
Yeah, let me just pick up on two things you said there, because it takes us into that chance where Finlay Marshall hits the bar. Because it's Ryan Dow who starts with the ball, or the ball's played into his feet, and then it's both of Scott Brown and Ross Matthews who go hounding him. And I mean, they are hounding him. They're both right on his tail. And, he's the kind of central man. He's pushed right out to the touchline. But when the fact that Arbroath managed to keep the ball and pop it back into Finlay Marshall, who's basically, they've done a Chin and Easton. Dow's started essentially gone wide. Marshall's come in. The fact that Brown and Matthews are doing exactly the same job in exactly the same place, one on each of Ryan Dow's heels, just creates all that space. And you see when you watch it back in the highlights, the back, or the Rovers' defence is in place. But, they can't come charging out to him. and it's Dylan Easton at that point as the kind of third man, and he's actually starting too far back. But you can see as he's going back, he's almost like, "Is this me? Am I really the guy who should be here?" And so I think you're right in what you say, that if that game finishes differently, we probably spend a bit more time talking about that midfield again. I think also if that strike from Finlay Marshall comes down a foot lower than it does, we should probably spend quite a lot of time talking about it as well. And listen, maybe it's kind of churlish to complain about these things after a 3-0 win, but the reason we've been talking about it was still kind of in evidence there. And slightly wider, again, to talk about the whole of the first half. I just felt like, there was a bit of an imbalance to it. And again, I think it stems from that. It stems from your two holding midfielders are both effectively the same type of player, the same profile. And then, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call it a 4-2-3-1. You're attacking three of Easton, Chin and McMullen. Again, are all broadly the same profile of player. They want to go and take on their man. They want the ball at their feet. They are more inclined to take the ball forward by running it than passing it, if you know what I mean. And it means that you become quite one note. As opposed to if you've got one guy in there in the middle who's more of a passer, you've then just got different options. It kind of multiplies your options. I don't know, Blair, if you felt the same at that first half, just a little bit disjointed, or is that maybe, kind of to Alan's point, are we maybe just not kind of crediting Arbroath quite enough?
No, I mean, I don't think it's discrediting Arbroath. They didn't really do anything. And I don't necessarily mean that massively negatively. They came in, they weren't, hugely sat in 10 men behind the ball, but they also weren't particularly swashbuckling and coming at us. They kind of came in, as Alan said, set up really well. They're really well organised, really well drilled. But for me, as a microcosm of what was wrong with that performance, that shot where he hits the bar is it in its entirety. Because it comes from their centre half, who kind of moseys out unimpeded, like nobody goes near him, nobody's close to him, and he plays one simple pass into Dow's feet. Now at that point, this is where I'm kind of more and more convinced it's not the 4-2-3-1, because the phrase you used was holding midfielders. Neither of them are or were for me yesterday playing as holding midfielders. They were all over the shop. And when it's good, that's part of what's good about them. They're everywhere. But when it's bad, it's because they're not where they're meant to be. The two of them, basically, the ball goes into Dow's feet and it's behind the two of them. Matthews is the closest, so Matthew goes. Dow turns back on himself, but almost turns into Scott Brown, who's kind of even more advanced than what Matthews is. And very quickly, the two of them don't get the ball, and to be fair, no discredit to them. It's a good bit of play for Dow, but not a massively complicated bit of play. But he plays the ball into the midfield, and like you say, that they've got the guy who should be out wide comes inside and has so much space because there is not a soul near him, and we just stand off him. And when is standing off of somebody against Arbroath ever come back to bite us? Do you know what I mean? It's like, how many times are we going to see this? And to be fair to the boy, it's a really good bit of skill. If you watch the replay, he opens his foot as he hits the shot, and it's dipping. Because when he first hit it, I thought that's away, and then you saw it dipping, and you saw Ray scrambling, and I'm like, oh my god, that's going in, cannoned off the bar. But for me, I'd say probably the first 50, maybe an hour, I honestly thought the midfield was really poor yesterday. And I think that was ultimately the bit we got wrong.
It's kind of weird to sit there after a 3-0 win and pick on the negatives. And some people will be like, "What he's been so negative for? We've won 3-0." But what you need to think of is we're going to play better teams than that. And it could, and it's in theory, Matthews and Brown could work very well together if you've got one. If they're disciplined enough to say, right, he's a way forward, so I'll drop back. All right, I've got the ball, so I'm going to go forward, and he'll drop back. They don't do that, and that's not a criticism of they're at the level they're at. I don't know many players who would be good enough as a two to kind of always make sure they're dropping back and covering it, and that's where we've been banging this drum a lot over the last few weeks. A lot of fans have. That's where having one of them with Byrne works perfectly because they know their role. Byrne knows it's his job to drop in, and Matthews or Brown knows he can go forward because Byrne will drop in. And yes, in theory, the two of them could work brilliantly, but it just doesn't seem to go like that.
I think the thing with that is it's when you're operating on like autopilot. It's easy enough to say, right, we've got the ball as we're building, so you go and I'll stay, or vice versa, or whatever that would be. But when the ball just breaks in midfield, and they both just go, there's a danger, I need to go to it. That's where I think the problem happens because they are so similar. And it's that, as you say, having Sean Byrne in there, you just have two different mindsets almost. It's like if you play, like a big man, small man strike partnership, classic kind of 90s 4-4-2, and the ball is about to get launched up the park. Each of them knows which of them is going to go and challenge for the header and which of them is going to go and run on for it.
It's so true.
It's that same dynamic, and it's just... I think you're right. I think that they're both very good players. There's definitely... It can work, but they're having to work harder than if you just have more kind of natural guys in those kind of positions. Also, Blair, you're absolutely right. I said holding midfielders there. I was kind of thinking of the formation, but you're right, it doesn't remotely describe that at all, though. You're spot on. Because they're not holding midfielders at all. I think probably best described as like box-to-box midfielders, maybe. I think would be the kind of closest shorthand. And I just don't think you need two of them.
No.
What you gain by having that, I don't think is enough compared to what you lose. Because I also don't particularly... presumably the logic behind it is, you've got all that energy, and that, they both go and charge Ryan down. That makes his life very difficult, and in that instance, he does very well to still kind of come away with his team in possession. But I think even if you do win the ball back there, you're not really far enough up the... I don't feel like they're both contributing to that sort of Robsonology of win the ball back, smash forward. I think you could get the same effect with one and someone. I say someone else. It's Sean Byrne. Slightly deeper and just a little bit more kind of conservative and actually being a holding midfielder next to your box-to-box midfielder.
I think that's a hugely important point, though, because if you bring Sean Byrne into that six and he sits, your other player, whether it's Matthews or Brown, is automatically 10 yards further at the park, and they're part of that attack. They're kind of there to support that attack, and they become box-to-box because they're there also to support the defensive stuff when it turns, but they're not getting caught constantly when it turns because their six is sitting and he's holding, and so it gives them the time at least to come back in and help out, or to cover the fullback, or the six will go and cover the fullback, which allows the midfielder back in or allows the fullback to come back in. It offers you that fluidity going forward, because as we keep saying, you're not constantly looking over your shoulder worried about, is there a gap behind me that nobody's going to fill, kind of thing. And I think you're absolutely right, Alan. It is easy kind of to sit and go, oh, we won 3-0 yesterday, that everything was wonderful, but the first half was pretty shit. I think it's fair. It wasn't terrible. We've played a lot worse than that. We've played a lot better than that and come in losing games before. Do you know what I mean?
You're not coming in thinking, oh God, how are we still 0-0? We should be getting pumped.
No, totally. We had chances. I think there was... I really like your analogy of no quite knocking on the door, but fanning about the doorstep. It was a bit like that. It was all speculative. There was balls across the box. There was a lot of that. But there was, for my money, there was 3 probably out of the 11 that I think in the first half really didn't perform very well, and it kind of showed up because there's no goal to come out of it. You kind of, you got a goal and you didn't worry so much about the crap. And then you get the goal quite quickly and everything kind of settled in it, and it was a really nice second half. But the first half wasn't good.
No, of course not.
And that's, it's a cliche. It's a cliche for a reason. Like, goals change games, and crucially, goals change how you feel about what is happening in front of you.
Completely.
Because see if we'd scored in the first minute of the first half, and then the rest of it had played out exactly as it did, you'd feel so much better about it. It's because the game's 0-0, and you don't, obviously, you're not winning yet. And then, as you say, the goal right at the start of the second half changes it. One thing I just thought was interesting before we move on from the first half, the chances that we did get, and they were half chances, they're very, very similar in style to the third goal, where it's down the right-hand side, getting the ball out wide, then sort of knocking it to the byline for the cutback. In the first half, it's McMullen, obviously, who's the kind of wide player. There's one where it's, I think, is it Matthews, possibly? And there's another where it's Jordan Doherty, who are sort of running beyond them and then trying to cut back. And again, as I say, it doesn't quite come to anything, but I thought that was interesting in light of what you were saying, in particular, Blair, in midweek, about Jack Hamilton and what kind of chances do you want to give him. I felt like a real, not that I'm drawing any kind of direct line, I'm not suggesting that anybody was listening, but what I'm saying is, it was a coincidence, but it was an interesting one. That it did seem like that's what they were trying to do, like, create those chances that, as ultimately, where the third goal comes from, where you're not necessarily kind of crossing from deep, or you're really trying to get down to the byline and then cut it back in. And,
I wonder if it's more about having watched the Dunfermline game, the Dunfermline Arbroath game, because pretty much all 5 of the goals were identical, and they were that goal. That third goal that we scored yesterday, I mean, Todd basically scored it 3 times against Arbroath.
The thing I thought was, the other thing with that is Craig Watson had been playing right back. Kind of, to my mind, always looks more like a centre half, even when he's asked to play right back. Although he's played there a lot for Airdrie over the years. They dropped him for Scott Stewart, who's more of a winger. Betrayed. I don't know how often he plays right back. That's just possibly just ignorance on my part. But I thought that was interesting, and I wonder how much that was a case of Dylan Easton or Richard Chin. Somebody is going to be on that side for the Rovers. They're going to be really dangerous, and they're going to be like quick and tricky. And whether they've looked at that and gone, I don't want somebody running in behind Craig Watson, so actually put Scott Stewart in, who's very mobile. A little bit like we saw with, you're not necessarily playing your defenders at fullback just because you'd rather have the mobility there.
Right.
And then obviously the chances really, pretty much all of the chances, certainly the ones I can think of off the top of my head, came down the right-hand side. So whether that was Scott Stewart actually showing up really well at right back, or a deliberate plan from us to go on the other side, who knows? But
Easton was quite quiet first half. Really, not he didn't play badly. He certainly he came alive a lot more in the second half. But they kept him pretty quiet. I think and I don't think him and Wilson quite had that kind of chemistry together either. Really.
Yeah, obviously that takes a bit of time.
Neither of them played badly. It's just it wasn't quite working.
I felt a bit sorry for Wilson at times. Like he'd get the ball and look up, and Dylan Easton wasn't there. He's just not there. he's away marauding in the middle of the park because that's where Dylan Easton wants to be, and that's what he's good at. But you turn it to the other side, and Doherty looks up, and he's always got McMillan in front of him. Like he's always there. Do you know what I mean? It's a really different thing when you're a left back and you look up. And when you're potentially, from the more I watch him as well, potentially a fullback who doesn't particularly like going forward an awful lot, I think is fair. He was better yesterday, but still not massively wanting to go forward, to have nobody in front of you.
It's funny you say that, because I wanted to talk about Wilson actually, because I think we were a wee bit down on him last week. But I think what we said is he doesn't look suited to wing back. So I was intrigued to see how he got on at fullback. And I agree with what you're saying there, that although he was, ostensibly being asked to play deeper, he looked more comfortable, even, kind of going forward. It was not marauding by any means, which I think is the adjective you're legally obligated to use for fullbacks. But he was getting forward enough, put it that way. And there's one where, one of the highlights, where he's basically on the penalty spot in the kind of second phase. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he gets a shot away. So I was quite pleased, I suppose. Just thought that without being kind of brilliant, I don't think he was a candidate for man of the match. I did think he looked much more comfortable asked to play left back effectively as opposed to left wing back, and looked the part, I suppose. If you know what I mean, didn't stand out for any negative reasons, certainly.
But it is difficult to overlap your left midfielder when he's not there. Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like,
I think especially because a lot of the time Dylan Easton's looking for the pass because he wants it back again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, selfishly, but not in a bad way. He's looking for a 1-2. He wants to play a pass so you can give him it right back so that he's on the move. So he doesn't necessarily need that big overlap for like a big swinging left foot cross. He's actually happier if you stop short and then he's got an option, and so your midfield comes across as well. But yeah, just kind of finally before we get into the goals, I thought Arbroath a really tricky side to kind of assess. As you both kind of alluded to there, that the doing well enough, but then ultimately getting beat 3-0. So did they is it just a case of that's what you do? You keep yourself in the game, and then you hope that your chance from 25 yards sneaks in under the bar, and it's a very different game at that point. But I don't know about you. I mean, we'll talk about this slightly backwards. The Rovers take the lead in the 46th minute through Paul Hanlon. We'll talk about that in a second. From that point on, though, were you ever reasonably concerned that Arbroath were going to come back into the game, Blair?
No, not at all. Honestly, not at all. It genuinely felt like one of those games where you were either going to lose at 1-0 or you were going to win at 3 or 4-0. Like, there was, to go back to Barry Robson's post-match last week talking about total control or whatever, we did have pretty much total control over that game without ever massively looking like scoring until we did. And then as soon as we scored, me and my mates all said the same thing. We're like, great, because they knew how to come at us. They have to. They can't sit in anymore. Not that they were massively defensive, like I said, but they were really well structured. But they had to come at us a little bit, which was going to create opportunities and going to create space, which is what we needed. Because I still think we're in the same position we were in last week and against Queen's Park. If a team wants to sit in against us, I don't think we're massively hard to sit in against. And it's if you can break through, we all said it, you'll take it bouncing off somebody's backside and going in, and it wasn't far away with really the first goal. But it's exactly what we needed. As soon as it happened, I was like, we're fine. We're absolutely fine. Never really in doubt.
Yeah, in terms of the goal itself, so it's Dylan Easton's corner that evades everyone except for Paul Hanlon at the back post. Still evades his left foot, but kind of comes off the inside of his right calf, possibly, and ends up in the goal. Allan, if the Rovers had conceded this goal, would you be having kittens about the defending?
No, but I'd be sitting listening to Les having kittens about it. You'd be a bit annoyed. You would be annoyed. You don't want to concede goal from corners at the back post. It shouldn't be beating everyone like that. It was an awkward ball. It kind of come in high. And it's funny because you think, Paul Hanlon is a really good asset in a situation like that. But you kind of expect him to be winning headers, not kind of for it to be kind of coming off his shin or wherever it eventually came off. So it wasn't great defending, but it was a good ball in. But Easton, to be fair, it was really tricky. One of those hard. The keeper doesn't know if he should come for it or not. we'd probably be having a debate about whether Josh Ray should come and clear it. I don't think he can. I think it kind of comes quite high and looping. It's a really awkward one to deal with. And as an attacking team, you want someone in there at the back post coming for that. But as a defending team, you also want someone at the back post defending that. So, yeah, would probably be quite annoyed to concede it. But as Blair mentioned, I think as soon as that went in, you just sort of went, excellent, that's that. We'll do better now. And it was like a completely different game from that point on.
Yeah.
I should say, actually, it is a brilliant cross. It's a really decent corner. I mean, Jack Hamilton must be inches away from putting it himself. He's very close to it with his forehead as it comes past. Aaron Muirhead, I think, is the one who's probably not going to want to see this back, particularly the kind of GoPro stanchion cam, which is right behind that post. To an extent, Paul Hanlon does really well because he just, quite simply, he gambles. He just gets across and thinks, Ken Simon, I'm just going to be the furthest man back here and just try and get in the road of this ball. And that's ultimately what he does. But Muirhead's there the entire time. Like, I thought at first...
Jumps over it.
Yeah. At first I thought, he must start on the post. And I was thinking, like, he just needs to stay there. He's pretty much where the ball comes down the entire time. And it's obviously tricky because the ball's swinging in and you can see how easily that can end up being an own goal. And I don't know if he's just banking on Hanlon not being there, but he does a sort of slightly odd little hop as the ball comes in.
It really does.
I don't know, you just need to, I suppose, just like shape your body up the park and try and just have a hack at that. I think just get something on it. Maybe he's thinking, if I do that, I'm just going to hammer it into somebody and it's going to end up in the goal anyway. But I think it's the quality of the cross that does it, really. And then the finish is all about getting there, I think, more so than the technique.
Get something on it.
Exactly. But you still get full credit for that, including a well-deserved man of the match. I'm sure we'll come back to. Now, immediately after the goal, as we've already said, the game felt very different. And just people will be sick of us talking about shapes and formations and stuff. So I don't want to kind of belabor the point on this. But the Rovers did at some point make a change. They departed from the back four that they'd started with and went to the kind of back three that we've seen a lot more of. Now, I fully intended to go back and watch the full match replay and try and kind of pinpoint when this change happened. But I didn't have the time or really inclination to do so. So all I can tell you is that by the second goal, it had happened because you can see it really clearly in the build-up to this, where Paul McMullen is sort of operating as the wing-back, effectively. You can see it's the back three as the ball comes across. Hanlon plays it to Docherty, who's stepping out, and he in turn then sort of plays it on to McMullen. And this, I think for me, so much of this is just down to that first touch from Dylan Easton. Yeah. Just kind of he's moved again, sort of centrally, and so has Richard Chin for the sort of purposes of this attack. But this is where, Blair, to your point about it looking like a front two, this is where that does the damage, effectively.
Yeah.
Because Easton, his touch is so good that when he turns, he's got two options. And I mean, Chin has to really burst a lung to get there. But you can see, again, from watching the highlights, you can see really early on that Easton knows he's coming. He has that little look and he just waits long enough to play that little pass through. And then the finish is brilliant. I mean, I know we're not a long time into the season, and Richard Chin scored goals last season, but still didn't look like someone who hadn't scored a goal for us before. That was a very confident finish. And Alan, I think safe to say we're all delighted for Richard Chin.
Definitely, it was just a really nice goal, and it's another one actually. You mentioned the kind of behind the goals GoPro view, and that just highlights. You know, they put it, the Rovers put it on Twitter earlier. The kind of passing and movement, and like you say, the kind of the touch for Dylan Easton and the wee look, and then the pass was just fantastic. It's everything you want from a player like Dylan Easton, and Chin with his pace. It must really help knowing that if I put this in there, he's going to outpace the defence. He just is. And then, like you say, the little dink over the keeper, it was just such a lovely goal, and really, really chuffed for the guy. I think he's come on so much quicker than certainly Barry Robson thought he was going to. You know, when we saw him in that first game down at Linlithgow, and you thought you could see there was talent there, but there was definitely a rawness to it, and he just seems to be polishing so much quicker than we all hoped he would. Like, you know, you thought this guy's going to be a player at this level, but he's developing so much quicker than we all thought he might, and I think he's going to be a really big player for us. I really do. I think he's going to, you know, you look at that, you look at the game next week now, and yes, County away is very different to Arbroath at home, but you think, how can you drop him? He just did so much work, and he's got that pace and ability in him that he's very much playing his way into being a regular first team starter for us, I think, with that performance. And the finish is just brilliant.
Jack Hamilton deserves a lot of credit there as well, because it's such a subtle thing, but when you watch back the replay of the goal, the kind of in the highlights, I should say, the kind of as it happens shot, which is obviously from that side, Hamilton's just kind of occupying both centre halves, which creates that gap for Chin to run into, and it's by nature of the fact that Chin's a little bit deeper, he's got a proper head of steam. So by the time the ball's played into him, he's pretty much at full flight. And these centre halves have not got a chance of catching him. And then the keeper comes out, and it's such a deft little finish. It reminded me a lot of Easton in the Derby, the League Cup game last season, the very first one, similar kind of thing. Just that ability to draw the keeper and just that little dink over the top. A lovely goal.
He actually looks like he should be offside. It looks like he should be offside. He's so far
but he's so deep.
And he's not. He's nowhere near.
He's so deep.
Yeah, just like no second thought in his mind. Knows exactly what he's doing. He's just and it's Dylan Easton's new boots going to good work there.
Should have had them on half an hour earlier, to be fair.
The thing is, though, he did genuinely seem to play much better when he changed them. It was quite strange.
He actually did.
Yeah, it was odd.
That was actually a very odd kind of phase of play, because like we all knew that Josh Ray was completely at it, that he was not injured at all. He was going down to give Dylan Easton time to change his boots. But clearly the ref knew that as well, so he's like, nah, you're not getting on yet. You're at it. You're staying off there. And it was just like, you can't keep him. Like, yes, you might not want to let him on the pitch, but I kind of think you have to, mate. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, totally.
So I was wondering this at the time, and partly, I think first of all, if from a sort of karmic sense, I think that's completely fine. Like, if you're
if it'd been Arbroath, you'd be like, aye, quite right, keep him off there.
Yeah, I haven't really caught this like kind of detour, but the podcast Football Cliches, which is very good. They were talking about this exact thing a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember how they got onto it, but they were talking about, it was a Dundee game where the goalkeeper had gone down and effectively pretended that he was hurt. And I think the question was, like, how much kidding on does the goalkeeper do? Like, when the physio comes on, does he just say to the physio, "Don't worry about it, I'm kidding on"? Or, like, does he have to sort of, like, method act it? And the further question was, like, does the physio, like, do physios take a Hippocratic oath? Is the physio sort of, like, duty-bound to be like, if there's no medical thing here? And the Dundee physio in question sent them an email to be like, no, he was absolutely at it. I knew he was at it. And we were purely just kind of wasting time. He's like, as soon as I got there, and he was like, nah, I'm fine. And apparently he'd only felt kind of comfortable doing that because he's since chucked his job at Dundee, now works for Aberdeen. So, fair enough.
I love that.
So, yeah,
by the way,
clearly...
I was going to say, I think it's worth hats off to Josh Ray. I know it kind of ultimately backfired because the ref did the whole I need to check your studs routine and then didn't he check his studs. But I don't remember us in the last few years anyway having that kind of... We always talk about being streetwise and having that game management and the mentality to do these things. I was actually genuinely really pleased when I saw Josh Ray go down because one of the boys next to me was like, "Oh, is he knackered his cell?" I'm like, "Nah, he's absolutely fine. Not a thing
totally
wrong
fine.
with him. Buying his time."
And it's that clever, that kind of thing, knowing that anyone else does it and they have to go off the pitch as well.
Correct.
But he doesn't it because he's the goalie. He's allowed to stay on. It's just really,
what's his face? Jerome Pryor at Livingston last season.
Oh,
any game where they weren't winning in the first 15 minutes, he went down and gave David Martindale time to do a wee team talk. It's probably not great that it's happening all the time now, but I mean it is, and ultimately it's you can't beat them, join them. Like there's no point standing on principle on that if you're Josh Ray. And I think probably what should have happened is he should have stayed down for so long that Dylan Easton could have gotten back on and had his boots checked by the linesman. I think it was waiting until he just about finished tying his laces that was the issue there, because it's obviously a rule like a blood injury that it has to be checked during a stoppage. But we'll know that for next time.
That's nonsense.
Of course it is. But actually, from that point of view, I was quite amused that the referee was just like, no, I'm not doing you any favours. That was blatant. On the subject of Josh Ray, just a quick point or a quick question on this one. So, in a kind of rare foray forward for Arbroath, as far as the second half was concerned, a kind of long ball over the top, Josh Ray and Jordan Doherty getting just a wee bit of a fankle, and ultimately they get away with it, but it didn't look too pretty. Blair, if the cost of Kevin Dabrowski was him not being kind of particularly good with the ball at his feet, is the cost of Josh Ray these kind of moments where he comes out of his box?
Possibly, yeah. I think that's the one criticism that was always laid at his feet by Airdrie fans, is they always had a red card in him. He always had that moment of mayhem coming out, and you kind of saw that even the St Johnstone game. Had they not gone 2-0 up, we're down to 10 men and they've got a free kick on the edge of the box. Like, do you know what I mean? It was absolutely horrendous, the tackle that he puts in that day.
The one at Falkirk as well in the pre-season.
Yeah, the one at Falkirk, that was, to be fair, pre-season friendly, so it's fine. He was just warming up. It was pretty bad. I actually kind of felt for him a little bit. I don't think he needed to come, but I also... I don't know, like, I'm not being funny, he's massive and he's bright pink. I'm not entirely sure how Jordan Doherty doesn't realise he's there. Like, what is Jordan Doherty looking at that point if he doesn't see that he's there, kind of thing? Because they end up kind of tangling, but I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe Doherty has to follow it through until the ball's played. I don't know. It just all seemed a little bit kind of clumsy, but yeah, we got away with it, so can't really complain.
I think that's the worst you can label it as. It was clumsy. Ultimately, they got away with it. And sometimes I think you'd say that about your goalkeeper. You'd say he's got to just come and clatter anybody who's there. And maybe sometimes you'd speak to a centre half who'd say, sometimes I'm going to follow it, and if the goalkeeper has to clatter me, has to clatter me. So ultimately, no harm done with that one. And that then takes us to the third goal, Alan. As I kind of said before, this is, I think, a type of attack that we'd tried a few times, and finally it pays off. This time, a few kind of substitutes involved as well. So it's Josh Mullen, who'd come on for Paul McMullen into that kind of right wing-back role, playing the ball into the channel for Kai Montague, who... zips the ball across for Jack Hamilton to knock in. Now, I originally, kind of watching this live, I was really impressed with Kai Montague sort of holding his run because he starts to go and then he checks and then makes sure that he's onside before he goes. That observation ruined somewhat by Aaron Muirhead, who's just sprinting away from the rest of his defensive line. So Kai Montague's actually got about 5 yards to play with, but he doesn't know that, so fair play for checking the run anyway. Ultimately, though, Alan, the goal that Jack Hamilton needed?
I think so. It was a lovely move. Josh Mullen doing what Josh Mullen does, and I also think a really good run by Montague, and it's really nice to see that he fits into the system that Barry Robson wants to play, and he's definitely, he had that. He didn't have a good game against East Kilbride this season, but I think the way he's come back since then and really kicked on. I think it's great to see. I think there's definitely a talented player in there, and it was a lovely move. But yeah, for Jack Hamilton, it's just what he needed. I think he'll hopefully take a lot of confidence for that. It's great to see him play 90 minutes as well.
I was going to mention that.
I wasn't sure he was going to, because he looked a bit leggy towards the end. I thought when Gentles come on, I thought it might have been him that went off. Fair play to Barry Robson for leaving them on and letting them kind of get those extra minutes in the legs to go with the old cliche. The way it was interesting, the way that Hamilton kind of talked it down a little bit in his post-match interview, saying, folk will say it's just a tap-in. But what we've always said is that's the kind of striker we want. We want the guy who's making that run onto the penalty spot, getting there on the six and just tapping it in, because we've got guys who will put balls in that area. So having a striker who will get into that position and tap, I don't care if we score tap-ins every week. If it wins us a game, I'll happily score goals like that. And it's where you want your striker to be. The best strikers
definitely
score loads of tap-ins. So brilliant. If he gets another 20 like that this season, we'll be doing very well.
This is it. I mean, if you think about the average Brian Graham goal we've seen over the last few years, that's not far off it. And it's about doing the numbers. 15, 20 of those in a season, everybody be absolute cock a hoop. So
if you're a guy like Montague or McMullen or Easton or Chin, and you've got a guy who's going to make that run, it makes your job so much easier. You think, right, I just put a ball in there, and as long as as long as they can beat the run of the defenders, he's going to get there and he's going to get goals. Brilliant, that's what you want.
On Kai Montague, I am really keen to see a little bit more from him, because I'm starting to wonder if he might not be actually a kind of key piece of the puzzle to getting this Rovers side to really start firing. So to go back to the start and every other discussion we've had this season, talking about playing 2 box-to-box midfielders and then kind of 3 attacking midfielders who are all of the same kind of ilk, and we're saying, right, well, Byrne solves the back half of that by providing kind of a sort of stable base alongside your box-to-box. Montague, I think, is potentially the one who could come into the middle of the 3. And actually, you've still got an Easton or a Chin or a McMullen, one on either side. But he can be that bit more Sam Stanton type, where he's got the drive, but he's also passing and being more of a facilitator, I suppose. Probably the best way to put it. And that's, I don't want to start piling on loads of pressure on him or anything like that. And there's not a huge body of evidence. But it's particularly the way that Barry Robson has been talking about him recently. He's gone out of his way a few times to really make sure he's name-checking Kai Montague when he's asked about the kind of how the squad is getting on. And, that can't ask any more than what he's done there. As I say, he times his run perfectly. He's on the ball. He gets head up, and it's pinpoint. Blair, are you prepared to join me in that?
I am. You are 100% right, and it's never going to happen. because we can't even get Sean Byrne into the midfield, let alone Kai Montague. Because ultimately, for that to happen, Brown and Matthews both have to come out, and I just don't ever see Robson
not
doing
necessarily. I would still have one of them in, but so I mean, it's vaguely different. It means one of either Chin, Easton, or McMullen has to come out. But
yeah,
that was my midfield three. I think in any midfield three, I think basically, and again, I apologise for lapsing into this kind of chat, but I think you basically need a 6, an 8, and a 10.
Yep.
And right now we are playing 2 8s and a winger, basically.
That's so true.
And I think Byrne is the 6, either Matthews or Brown is the 8, and I think, hope more than think, Kai Montague could be the 10. This is my theory. I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see it tested anytime soon.
Nah.
But he's done himself no harm at all. Done his chances no harm at all with that assist there.
I think by the nature of the players that ultimately would have to make way for him, McMullen is all running all the time, which is big, massive ticky box for the manager. Easton is, in my mind, irreplaceable. He's the first name on the team sheet every week. He has to be. And so then you're looking at potentially it being, like you say, Richard Chin coming out, or Lewis Vaughan, who's obviously out with a wee knock and would be coming back in, but he would be that kind of other player as well. I just think that there's, we always talk about referees make the easy decision. The ball comes into the box, just give the centre half the free kick. For managers, there's the easy decision. Kai Montague is not hard to drop, is the honest truth. Nobody's going, oh my God, why on earth is Kai Montague no getting a game? But we are about Byrne. We will about Vaughan. Do you mean we kind of wear a little bit about Chin? Like it's that. It's a shame because I think I genuinely think you're 100% right. I think he is exactly the player we need in there.
I mean, I don't think it's going to lead us to the same end point. I will say, Barry Robson, not a take the easy option kind of manager.
True.
I think.
That's
but
true.
yeah, I don't think that's going to mean that Kai Montague's playing in the 10 up at Dingwall next week.
No.
Just one other kind of quick point on the game itself. I don't know if you'll be kind of prepared to give me much of an opinion on this. Early impression on Josh Gentles, Alan? Prepared to make any kind of observations?
Didn't think he really got much time. He looks he's quite a big lad, but he looks like he's quite mobile as well. It's really tough to say, to be honest. I didn't think he got much of a chance to do it. I mean, there's enough to see that there's a kind of well-coached young footballer there, but yeah, it's very difficult to form any kind of opinion on him based on the very short period we've seen.
He'd been in the park about 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and my dad sat next to me and he says, this guy, is he not supposed to be a striker? It's like, it looks like he's playing more in kind of midfield. And that's completely true. But I think that's a Barry Robson striker.
Yeah.
I think that was just, he came on and did the job that Barry Robson wants his strikers to do. And I think that's probably a good thing in the sense of that's kind of what you want loan players if they're coming in is to fit in and, follow instructions, I suppose, effectively. So, we'll maybe see some more from, as you say, very, very small sample size from that. Just a final point in terms of man of the match, Paul Hanlon. Feels like he needs to score a goal to get man of the match. Blair, I mean, well, first of all, I don't know if you're prepared to argue with that. And face the wrath of Ian Latto. But anyone else who you think was particularly impressive yesterday?
Yeah, to be fair, I thought there was a few. I think, given I wasn't particularly flattering about his first half performance, I thought Scott Brown was really good in the second half. Really good, actually. Callum Fordyce, again, for me, I think Callum Fordyce now might be becoming the second best player every week. We kind of mentioned it just briefly off air about the it's such a small thing, but we pass the ball about at the back sometimes quite slowly. Fordyce always misses out the man next to him and goes straight to the winger. So he rolls the ball into McMullen's feet rather than giving it to Doherty to give to McMullen if he can, which I really like. I thought he was really good yesterday again. Really, really good. And weirdly, Hanlon was fine yesterday. It wasn't really a man of the match performance for me. He didn't have an awful lot to do. Like, he did fine. There was nothing particularly wrong. But I thought Chin was a wee bit hard done by, I have to say. I thought he'd had a really good game, even when things weren't working in the first half. Everything that looked semi-decent, kind of, he was a part of and he was involved in. So he probably would have been mash out. But you can't grudge Paul Hanlon getting his, as you put it, the primary six participation trophy. That they seem to be handing out for man of the match.
Funny looking trophy that they gave him. I mean, on that point, I completely agree what you're saying about Fordyce. That is seems like such a small thing, but I mean, at times when you're criticising teams for being pedestrian, that little move where you just pass the ball from the centre half out to the winger, that can make a huge difference. And it's not, to talk about easy choices, it's not the easy choice.
Yeah.
Your centre half's never going to get his head torn off for passing to his fullback. No. You're taking a chance by missing him out, but that's where you can make the difference. And Fordyce is brave enough to do it, and he does it repeatedly.
It makes a difference though as well, because if the ball goes from the centre half to the right back, then their left winger or left back has got a fairly decent idea that ball is then going out to the right winger, and he's got time to get over there and close him down. Whereas if Fordyce cuts that man out and goes straight to him, he's probably getting a bit more time on the ball.
Yeah, definitely. Because then the fullback's having to either step up or the winger's having to come across.
Yeah.
And you're making them think rather than letting them just block in and kind of defend on autopilot. And it's not leading to 6 chances a game or anything, but it does make a difference. It does help, definitely. Just my notes from the last episode that we did, I'm still on the same page of my notepad, and I've just got a bit that says back 3 so good, and I'm just going to stick to that. I still think back 3 so good this week as well. Allan, is there anyone else you would like to shine a light on in the man of the match discussion?
Yeah, I agree on Chin. I thought Chin was, even without his goal, I thought he really took his chance well. Of getting a start. I think he's given Barry Robson a real decision to make. To be fair, Barry Robson has shown that he will make the decision he wants to make. Be damned if anyone else thinks he will do it, and that's quite right. It's his job at the end of the day. Without wanting to sound like a broken record again, I thought Jordan Doherty was brilliant. I really did. I thought he, right side of a back 3 or right back, he just does the job. He had his little moment with Josh Ray, who I also thought was, without needing to do anything, was just absolutely solid at with Bolly's feet more than anything, Josh Ray, because that's all he had to do. But yeah, I thought Jordan Doherty was he just did what Jordan Doherty does, and I'm quite happy that he just quietly goes about his business, because hopefully nobody's really taken notice of him yet, because I think if people do start watching him, we're going to have some teams in, maybe bottom half of the Premiership, looking at him and thinking, he's a guy we could bring in and he'll do well for us. And
he's my kind of prime candidate at the moment for last season's Paul Hanlon dynamic of won't win any man of the matches, could very well win Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Like, just he's so good. He just is.
Yeah.
And just like his baseline performance is so good. And as I said it in the pre-match, and it proved to be the case. You just said it there. I think he almost alone gives you the confidence to switch between the back 3 and the back 4, mid-game, because he's so seamless that the rest of everybody else can just kind of work along. and he'll do a lot of the transition stuff. Just, excellent.
Even just like the Morton game when Josh Mullen got sent off, not having to panic, not having to make the rushed sub, just shuffle across, go back to the back four. We're absolutely fine, boys. Don't worry about it. Like it's a level of kind of calmness in team selection that we've not had for a long time, where something like that can happen. And actually, you're now at a stage where pretty much any one of the back four, or back five, sorry, could potentially get sent off or get an injury or whatever, or have to go off for a strap of the head or whatever. You don't have to panic. You've not got Scott Brown filling in at centre half. You've no, do you know what I mean? We're all right.
Yeah, definitely. I'm still got Darryl Connor in reserve as well.
Yeah,
easy
that's true. We've not even seen him yet.
No.
Yeah.
That was a really enjoyable. I think on a kind of just a final kind of summarising point, talked about in the pre-match about the kind of tone and the whether this game would be kind of defining depending on what happens. And ultimately, I don't think it was, but for quite a positive reason. Because, first of all, we won 3-0. That's a very good thing. And ultimately, I think that was closer to the kind of expected result, if you know what I mean, than a draw or a loss would have been. But also, I think with an optimistic lens, you have to look at that and think, 1-3-0, still a lot in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 3-0 win against a side who've been pretty decent this season, most of the time. And actually, still a lot more to come from this Rovers side. Might not click every week, might still be frustrations in it, but there's a lot to like in there. And I think that's yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
five
clean sheets in 8 games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot to like, definitely. And a lot more to talk about, which we will do later in the week. Thank you, everybody, for listening tonight. We will be back midweek to look ahead to the long trip north to take on Ross County, try to put some playoff demons to bed. We will speak to you again then. Thank you. Goodbye.